Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to This Week in FCPA for the week ending September 9th of 2016. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Jay Rosen, Mr. Translations himself, Vice President of Sales at Merrill Brink, where we review this week's FCPA compliance and ethics comings and goings. It was a fairly slow week on the FCPA front. We did have one declination from Cisco Systems, which yesterday received a declination from both the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission for an investigation which began in 2014. We talk about the S.E.C. crashing through the $100 million mark for bounties paid to whistleblowers under the Whistleblower program, bounty program, which was enacted in Dodd-Frank. And we have a lengthy discussion of Whistleblower Inc., the Whistleblower Industrial Complex, Sean McCasey, and the overall effectiveness of the S.E.C. Whistleblower program and what you need to do as a company to respond to this. We discuss the 50th anniversary of Star Trek and how that informs your compliance program. We note that last night was the first game of the NFL season, so we give our Super Bowl predictions. The Super Bowl will be in Houston this year, so we certainly wanted to talk about that. I talk about my next ebook, which will be coming out, which will review the summer of 2016 in the FCPA world. We had some pretty significant enforcement action, so I wanted to talk about that. Then I talk about two events I'm associated with next week. Gerber, Greater Houston Business and Ethics Roundtable event on Thursday, September 15th. On the same day, a Red Flag Group webinar on our continuing series of supply chain risk management. Jay details what he'll talk about in his weekend newsletter. The episode comes in at just over 30 minutes. This is Tom Fox. I'd like to thank you very much for listening to This Week in FCPA. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 21 of This Week in FCPA for the week ending September 9th, 2016. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and co-host, Jay Rosen. Jay, welcome.
Hey, Tom. Happy Friday, and good to be back on the air talking to you about the week that was in FCPA.
Indeed. Jay, not a lot of activity this week, but a few things that we think we could to visit on and maybe take a little bit more of a deep dive into this few items this week. Today, as reported on the FCPA blog, Cisco Systems received a declination from both the Department of Justice and the S.E.C. closing out their FCPA investigations. The investigations began in March of 2014 at the request of the agencies, and it involved allegations of around the company and some of its resellers in former CIS countries and operations in Russia. So congratulations to Cisco Systems. We also had another interesting milestone, and maybe this is what we could spend a fair amount of time visiting about, but we have the Securities and Exchange Commission broke the $100 million mark for payments of whistleblower bounties. And there was a S.E.C. press release on this, and pretty significant, I thought. And that's based on about $500 million in fines and penalties that were obtained by the S.E.C. So it looks like their whistleblower program is here to stay. Anything this week that particularly struck you?
I would agree with you that it's been kind of a little bit of a slow week getting back to school and stuff. So I can't say that there's anything. The one thing that I will say that there was a piece that Richard B. Strong wrote this, I think it was either Wednesday or Thursday in the FCPA blog, and he took a look at the personal costs of not only bribery but kind of working too hard in your career and about getting wrapped up in the rat race and making deals and it really had a very warm tone, and it struck me deep in my heart. You know me, I'm always talking about Millie and Michaela, and I guess the takeaway I took from Richard's piece was that you need to make sure as a person that you are not only providing financially for those people who you care about, but you're also there to provide for emotionally, and especially if you have family commitments, those are the things that really should take priority. And then I just felt a real sense of he feels some loss from being in those go-go days and trying to make those deals. So I don't know if it's really more from an ethics and a compliance perspective, but that piece that he wrote this week really resonated with me.
That's something I think a lot of A-types like us struggle with. I know I did. I probably wasn't until I was in my 50s, until I got anything close to an appropriate work and life balance. Although my wife would probably say I'm still not there yet. But certainly up until that time, I had a lot of, and it caused a lot of problems and a lot of wreckage in my past. So I certainly agree with that, those sentiments as well. We did have one anniversary that I have to talk about, Jay. Hopefully, with your Hollywood connections, you will appreciate it. And that was yesterday, September 8th, was the 50th anniversary of the premiere of what I think is the greatest television science fiction show ever, Star Trek. And on September 8th of 1966, The Man Trap appeared on a special sneak preview on NBC. And the original series, as it's now monikered, ran for 3 years, 79 episodes, and has been in reruns and syndication since that time in the entirety of the universe. Spawned, I think, 5 other TV series, 6 movies from the original cast in the original series, and I think we're on movie number 4 from The Next Generation. So this is a pretty significant date. I blogged about it. Obviously, it's something that I really enjoy. I listen to podcasts about Star Trek. I read books about Star Trek. I rewatch Star Trek TV episodes. So I'm a self-professed Uber Trekkie, and so that was a nice anniversary for me this week. We should also note that last night the Denver Broncos beat the Carolina Panthers to open the NFL season, and I think we would are both very pleased that the NFL is back. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was who you might see in the Super Bowl this year, because it's going to be held in Houston. And I'm sure you're going to shock me by picking the New England Patriots from the AFC, and I'm already shocked to even think that you would think that. But I would tell you that's my pick from the AFC as well.
Well, I think you know me. I'm always spouting pearls of wisdom from the hoodie one, and I'm not really sure we're going to know what we get until about 1 month's time. So after we, the rust come off and we see 4 weeks in playing, I think I agree with you that New England is definitely one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the AFC. Along with the Broncos, along with the Steelers, those teams are perennially strong. But I think the one thing that we've already seen before the season's even started is that how fragile an NFL player's career and longevity, I can't speak this morning. If you look at what happened with the Vikings and Teddy Bridgewater, they were very high favorites to win their division and to move ahead. He's a young quarterback going into the 3rd year of his career, and then his knee just goes out during practice. So there's been some ripples and repercussions. Philadelphia essentially got rid of Sam Bradford, picked up a slew of draft picks. So I think, one thing we know for sure is I don't think Minnesota will be a playoff team unless something, strangely happens and they start to gel. In the NFC, perennially, I like the Packers, I like the Seahawks, and I like Carolina, but, there is going to be injuries that are definitely going to shape the argument, but I guess for right now, I won't disappoint you. I'll be a homer, and I'll pick New England. And I think Seattle made some very strong moves in the offseason, so I'll say New England, Seattle will be in Houston, and maybe I've got to figure out how to become a corporate high roller and get a ticket to come see you in February.
Well, I'm going to go with the Patriots and the Packers. I think it's with Jordy Nelson back. I think it's going to be the Packers' year, but you're absolutely right. It's all about the injuries, and just from what we've seen already in the preseason, Bridgewater went down out for the season. Romo's down. I can't imagine he's going to be out for anything less than 10 weeks. Gronk may or may not play Sunday. And that's just kind of preseason stuff. So who knows where it's all going to be? All I can say is I can't even say that. I assume there'll be a Super Bowl in Houston next February. But with that, maybe we could visit a little bit about the whistleblowers, because it was really more, Jay, than the announcement of the crashing through the $100 million mark. It's actually up to $107 million. We had an announcement that the person who started the whistleblower section at the SEC, Sean McKessie, is leaving the SEC and is going to private practice. We had a couple of articles in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal about the whistleblower industrial complex, as the Journal termed it. And in the Times, it talked about the plethora of law firms who are now taking whistleblower and actively soliciting whistleblower cases. I was really impressed with some of the numbers that the SEC put out in their press release. They're now getting up to 4,000 whistleblower tips a year. They've gotten whistleblower tips from all 50 states and 95 foreign jurisdictions as well. So lots of information coming in. The SEC has, I think, been pretty aggressive in sanctioning companies who have tried to forbid their employees and report illegal conduct or allegations of illegal conduct to the Securities and Exchange Commission. We had the KBR pre-retaliation enforcement action, where KBR tried to prevent employees from going to the SEC via confidentiality agreement. We had companies which tried to forbid employees from receiving the statutorily mandated whistleblower bounties in the form of severance agreements. We had HealthNet and Blue Links Holdings had SEC enforcement actions against them, and we had an enforcement action against a company, Paradigm Capital, who an employee suffered retaliation as a result of reporting of illegal conduct to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And the business community's response was that this is certainly going to hurt our efforts to handle things internally. And if you listen to what the SEC says, the numbers they bandy about, Jay, are 95% of all whistleblowers report internally first. And they try to report internally. And they try to go through internal channels, and they're frustrated. Frustrated via not taking their claim seriously, frustrated because the company actively retaliates against them, frustrated because companies do not fully investigate their claims, or frustrated because the companies just don't believe they've engaged in such conduct. And we've talked about on the this podcast the op-ed piece written by Eric Ben-Artsy, who was a Deutsche Bank whistleblower who actually turned down his whistleblower award because he didn't feel like the SEC fully aggressively enforced the Securities and Exchange Act against Deutsche Bank. But We had an interesting whistleblower this past fortnight involving Monsanto. And this whistleblower reported internally that sales were being booked in a manner that he believed was illegal and falsified earnings. And he took this report internally. His allegations were rejected. And he was concerned enough, or he was concerned rather, that the firm's external auditor, Deloitte, actively fought his analysis. And so he went to the SEC, and the SEC concluded an enforcement action against Monsanto based upon these allegations. Well, this whistleblower, he's anonymous. He still may be with Monsanto, we don't know, but his lawyer released a statement, and his lawyer, on behalf of the client, advocated that the SEC investigate Deloitte for its actions in both the original evaluation and the conduct of Deloitte after this Monsanto whistleblower made his allegations. So this is really the first time we've had someone call out a external service provider or subject matter expert, such as an external auditor, but it certainly could be a law firm. It could be any other service provider who helps a company try to fight or beat back whistleblower allegations internally made, and it turns out that the whistleblower allegations are correct when he goes to the SEC. So I found this a really interesting twist, and it may speak, Jay, to the maturity of the whistleblower program, that we're starting to get these types of issues to flesh out the responsibility of everyone when a whistleblower comes forward. And I know you work a lot with companies on internal investigations and helping them to unravel or investigate allegations that are brought forward. So what are some of the things kind of from your perspective?
Well, one thing is I'm hearing this little whisper coming to me from somewhere in Illinois saying we now have the rise of whistleblower INC. But seriously, I think this program really serves as a check and balance on the internal reporting structures within most companies, and I think it really points out that a lot of times this conversation is about tone at the top and tone at the middle and tone at the bottom, and what these over $100 million in awards seem to indicate is that still your employees want to do the right thing, they want to report, and unfortunately there does not seem to be that feedback loop, number one, confirming that allegations have been made to the individual so they know that they are being heard, and number two, action still does not seem to be taken. And it really resonates with me, the fact that you shared that the majority of these reports that end up in awards are still going through the proper channels. So I think that this definitely, people are not doing this for the money, just like Mr. Benartzi. They're doing this because they really deeply care about their company, and especially with the Deutsche Bank, he's saying, look, I don't need this money, but what you should be doing, S.E.C, is that you should be looking out for the rights of the investors in this bank, and that at the end of the day, going back to the Yates memo and everything else, there should be individual culpability, and someone should be taking the blame for what has happened. It should not be a corporate entity doing a payout.
A couple of things that struck me, Jay, from what you said. First of all, companies need to be in a position to quickly and efficiently triage allegations that come in via, whether that's via anonymous reporting, whether it's via hotline, whether it's via someone raising their hand and say, hey, I need you to take a look at this. And then they need to have an investigation protocol in place so that it can be elevated to an appropriate level if it turns out that that's something that needs to be done. And so companies really need to think through how they're going to respond, because the clock is ticking. And after 120 days, you may find yourself, the whistleblower, going to the SEC and the SEC saying, why didn't you take this allegation seriously? But the Monsanto whistleblower brought up a point I touched on, but it's really, Jay, who watches the watchers. So when the Monsanto whistleblower called out Deloitte, Deloitte's role was as a external auditor. And if an external auditor makes a valuation based upon reasonable professional judgment and then defends that valuation, yet it turns out that that valuation was not legal, then the question is, well, who should be looking at Deloitte's work? And I always point back to the example of Enron here in Houston. And they had a whistleblower as well, a woman named Sharon Watkins, and she raised allegations directly to the CEO, Ken Lay. He turned it over to the general counsel, who asked their regular corporate counsel to investigate the work it had done for the company. And unfortunately, I will tell you that whenever you ask a lawyer to investigate their own work, the answer is always going to be the work was good. So that did not serve Enron, did not really take a look at the problems which popped up less than 60 days later when the company had to declare bankruptcy. So in this press release, the Monsanto whistleblower's lawyer, a fellow named Stuart Meisner, said this raises the question about the auditor's role. They were checking their own work. So if an allegation comes in that has touched upon the work done by an external service provider, such as Deloitte, such as a law firm, such as someone else, I think that means as a company, you may need to get a third party to come in and give you another opinion. Certainly, Monsanto learned a very expensive lesson this way, but I can certainly see that fallout moving towards the FCPA. But the overall, your point, Jay, about the overall success of the program, and we may now have the Whistleblower Industrial Complex, or Whistleblower Inc., or we certainly have firms. Jordan Thomas, I think, has specialized in whistleblower cases since the office of the whistleblower at the SEC was opened. He's been very successful. He's written a lot about it and has talked about how he can work with not only the whistleblower, but also the regulatory agencies to help craft an appropriate settlement. So it's more than just somebody standing up and saying, hey, I thought I saw something wrong. Now you're having very sophisticated counsel, and Sean McKesney is as sophisticated in terms of the whistleblower program as probably anyone, since he ran the whistleblower office, talking to the SEC about resolutions and really what's going on inside of a company. And this could become an even more powerful way for certainly the SEC, but perhaps other federal agencies as well, to get information. Now, there's no DOJ bounty program. The bounty program is under Dodd-Frank, but even there, obviously, you can have a FCPA violation for a publicly listed company. And we think we had the first FCPA whistleblower bounty award paid in the BHP Billiton case. The person who made the allegation remains anonymous and was not named, but in its resolution, Billiton, it did not indicate how that information got to the Securities and Exchange Commission around their gifts and entertainment program for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. So could be quite lucrative for foreigners now. If we had someone from Australia turning over information which led to a bounty payout under the FCPA.
Just it keeps growing and changing and morphing. It's always I always wonder what we're going to read in the newspaper the next day when we wake up. So certainly a very interesting development.
Jay, I've got a couple of things coming up I wanted to mention before we signed off today. First of all, if you're listening to this and you happen to be in Houston, next Thursday will be the Greater Houston Business and Ethic Roundtable meeting. We're going to have a panel discussion of for three prominent chief compliance officers and compliance practitioners here in Houston. You can get more information on it at the Gerber website, which is ghber.org. And I would invite you to come join us for that presentation. Unfortunately, at the same time, the Red Flag Group is having a webinar, so I can't participate in the webinar, but it's continuing the Red Flag Group series on supply chain risk management. And this is part 2 of that, and they're going to talk about how to stake out the information from your supply chain partners. And I think given what the Wall Street Journal has reported about Wellspun and its fraudulent claims that it was selling high-grade Egyptian cotton to its customers, Target and perhaps others in the United States, it would be very appropriate for you to listen to this webinar. The webinar is free. You can go to it or registration and information is found at the Red Flag Group's website, which is www.redflaggroup.com. There's a button on there for webinars. So a couple of interesting things next week. And then, Jay, I'm really pleased to announce that given the plethora of what I thought were significant FCPA matters we had this summer, I've decided to write a ebook on the summer of 2016, summer of FCPA. So I'm working with Maurice Gilbert at Corporate Compliance Insights to publish that book. So I hope to have that out. And then going through and editing it, Jay, you will be pleased to note that several of the enforcement actions this summer specifically mentioned the companies had documents translated. So, Mr. Translation lives. And I guess, Jay, what it brought up for me is in 2016, are there still companies that don't understand that they need to have a translations protocol in place? Any thoughts on that?
I'm sure they all understand. I think what they need to do is understand the intrinsic value and what that does for them just in the eyes of their employees globally. And, unfortunately, what we've seen over the past several years is people don't tend to get religion, and they don't tend to spend this money in a proactive or preventative way, but it's usually very reactive once the investigation starts. So I think the people that we talk to when we deal with the compliance and ethics professionals, they would like to do this, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to budget, and it comes down to risk analysis. And just like a lot of the things that we advocate, there's a lot of things that people would like to have in their program, but there is not budget there. So, one of the things to probably do is if you're in a vertical that has a lot of scrutiny, whether it's the pharma vertical or whether you're in banking or whatever, if you see that your competitors are facing these problems, and whether they're publicly traded or large private companies, these are things that as an ethics and compliance officer, you really need to make your voice heard. And as tough it is to push that rock up the hill, you can really be doing a benefit for your company by bringing to light something as clear to you and me, Tom, that if you do business globally, your global employees need to understand the expectations that you have of them and the tools that are available to them to prevent fraud and corruption.
So, Jay, one of the pleasures I get every weekend is reading your weekend report. Maybe you could end up our podcast this week by previewing for the audience what you're going to write about and link to and talk about in your weekend report.
Thanks, Tom. So what I'm going to take a look at the fall conference season. So I'm going to give some links to some upcoming conferences. And there's a couple that I'm sampling this September and October that I've never been to before. Next week, I'll be in New York City for the GIR Live Conference and Awards. GIR is an organization from England that publishes a magazine called Global Investigations Review, as well as other who's and legal products. They, a couple of years ago, acquired Mary Jacoby's Just Anti-Corruption for Maine Justice. So this is something that sits squarely within our wheelhouse of FCPA and anti-corruption. So I'll have a report on that when we speak next weekend. That's going to loop into one of our favorite conferences, the S.E.C. Compliance and Ethics Institute, which is at the end of the month in Chicago from September 25th to the 28th.